Good morning once again. This is getting so exciting here. It's getting so exciting here as I was following up about this issue of the American government, coming up and saying the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints are not Christians and all that stuff. It's actually getting hotter here. And I listened to one of these podcasts of this great guy who was really explaining these things about what exactly is happening and how the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has issued the American government a warning. That is relative to his title. I don't know which warning is that, but listen to what he has to say here. Please welcome.
LDS Church, or the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, quietly distributed millions of pounds of food across the United States. Most people who saw it treated it as like a warm humanitarian story. And in a way it is. It's a church doing good things, nice. However, I want to suggest to you that that's exactly the wrong way of looking at it. Because the LDS Church doesn't operate a casual food pantry. They operate one of the most sophisticated food procurement, storage, and distribution networks in the entire country. They have been doing this for nearly a century. They have visibility into food insecurity across America that almost no other organization has, including the federal government. Now, in this video, I'm not telling you the world is ending. I'm not trying to sell you buckets of freeze-dried food or anything else. But I'm here to tell you that when an organization with the infrastructure at that level and visibility into what's actually happening across the different states here in the United States, and they make a move like this, a prepared citizen pays attention. So today we're going to talk about why this particular story matters, what actually is happening to the food supply right now, and exactly what you and your family should be doing starting right now. Let's get into it. Welcome back to The One Row, and I'm glad you're here. On this channel, we focus on real practical preparedness to help you and your families be prepared for whatever the future holds. If this is the kind of content that you want to support, hit the like button. It really does help me out. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and turn on notifications so you'll get my latest stuff when it gets released. It does genuinely help the channel, and it helps this message reach other individuals. And this one's a really important one. But before we get into the broader picture, I want to make sure that you understand why the LDS Church specifically matters in this conversation. Now, if you have religious differences with them, cool, no worries. For the context of this discussion, it doesn't matter, whatever your religious beliefs are, because if you're not familiar with the food infrastructure of the LDS Church, it's easy to dismiss this as a big, church from across the country doing charity work. And that's true, they are, but I think there's a lot more to this story than that. Because you see, the LDS Church has been practicing and teaching food storage and preparedness to the members of their church since the 1930s or even earlier. This is not a recent thing. For nearly 100 years, they've been telling their members to maintain a long-term food storage or food supply, and they've built an entire infrastructure across the country to support that principle. So what they do is they operate what are called bishop storehouses. They're regional food distribution centers that distribute food to members and other community members in need. They have canneries, they've got farms, granaries, grain storage infrastructure, and a procurement network for other food that is really, really impressive. And most critically, because they are actively engaged in feeding people across the country on an ongoing basis, they have real-time visibility into food insecurity that most organizations simply don't have. They see it through their bishops at the local level, and they see it through their storehouses. They see it through the requests that are coming in from the members and other people in their community who the church happens to be supporting. That is what they do every single day, and the vast majority of people in the public don't see it. And they literally just moved about an estimated 10 million pounds of food across all 50 states. And for them to distribute this much food to their communities, across 50 different states, that to me is a signal. And as prepared people, we pay attention to signals and to news stories that aren't getting as much attention as they should. Now, let's talk about why this signal matters given everything else that's happening right now, because this isn't a single problem or a single story, because there's a stack of problems hitting simultaneously, and that's what makes this different than normal fluctuations in food prices and the food supply. And as many of you know, a significant portion of what Americans eat on a day-to-day basis comes from outside the United States. There's fruit and vegetables from Mexico and Central America, there's seafood from Southeast Asia, olive oil from Europe, coffee, cocoa, spices from around the world. The list goes on. When tariffs go up on imported goods, which they have, whether you're for tariffs, against tariffs, not the point. Tariffs do cause the price of items to go up. Sometimes that cost will get absorbed initially by the importer or by a retailer, by the grocery store, and they'll do it for a while to maintain stability and customer satisfaction, etc. But eventually it will reach your grocery bill. We have already been seeing this, and it's beginning to show up more and more and more as prices continue to climb. The second thing that's adding to this is whether you've heard about it or not, there's actually a current bird flu outbreak. It's actually the largest in American history that we're dealing with. We've lost hundreds of millions of birds to culling and to the disease itself. The egg prices that you have seen over the last couple of years, at least, are a direct result of this. The poultry supply has been significantly impacted, and the concerning part is that the outbreak is not over. It continues to move through flocks, and every time a new flock is infected, either the birds die or the farmers have to cull the whole frickin' flock. And rebuilding the laying hens, the ones who actually lay the eggs, it takes months for them to go from hatchlings to egg laying. So this is a structural disruption at a core part of the American food supply that's going to continue affecting prices and availability for the foreseeable future. Next, we've talked about this recently in other videos, but the American West has been dealing with a sustained drought condition for several years now. The Colorado River itself is under serious stress. Aquifers in the Great Plains that irrigate corn and wheat crops are down faster than they recharge. California's Central Valley, which produces like a third of America's vegetables and 2/3 of fruits and nuts, it continues to face water availability challenges. And when water gets scarce, crops get expensive. And when crops get expensive, the food prices that you pay at the grocery store and at restaurants, it gets more expensive as well. Next is fertilizers. Russia and Belarus are two of the world's largest producers of nitrogen fertilizers. The sanctions from the Ukraine conflict and supply chain disruptions, they've sent fertilizer prices to historic highs over the last couple of years. And the tensions with Iran, between the U.S. and Iran right now, they are not helping either, as many fertilizers that are produced in the Middle East are having trouble getting out of the Strait of Hormuz. Higher fertilizer prices mean higher production costs for farmers. Higher production costs for farmers means that every point in the supply chain from there all the way to the grocery store is going to go up. And those prices are still being absorbed, or those costs from farmers are still being absorbed into the supply chain. And those aren't going to go down because the fertilizer prices continue to be a huge problem. Next is the supply chain. Most people assume that the supply chain issues that we had from COVID are totally behind us. And they're partly right. The most acute disruptions have been resolved, but the underlying fragility that COVID exposed, all those stories that you heard about, just-in-time inventory models and whatnot, that is still what the food industry runs on, and it leaves very little buffer. Grocery stores typically have 3 to 5 days of inventory. Distribution centers that feed those grocery stores have not much more. One significant disruption, whether it be a weather event, a cyber attack, disease outbreak, infections, I don't know, whatever it is, if it affects a key region, empty shelves are going to hit every store near you. You've seen this when a winter storm is announced near you, and all of a sudden you go to the store right before you go to the store right before the storm, and there's nothing on the shelves. And then it takes days for things to get restocked, even if once the weather clears. And next is the low and middle class budget problem. This is different from the others because it's not about supply, it's not about rain, it's purely about demand and access. Inflation over the last several years has hit food prices particularly hard. The American family is spending significantly more on groceries than they have even just 5 years ago. Wages have risen a little bit over that time, but not near enough to cover the increase in food prices or to keep up with inflation in general. We are seeing credit card debt at record levels. We're seeing credit defaults where people aren't able to pay their bills at record highs. Saving rates are down. Families are making hard decisions at the grocery stores. They're buying less, they're buying cheaper, or skipping certain categories entirely. Food bank usage across the country has reached record levels. This isn't happening in poor communities alone. This is happening for middle class people as well. I consider myself to be middle to upper middle class overall, and I find myself avoiding beef.
So basically, what this gentleman is saying, that interfering with the operations of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and trying to show that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints are not Christians, and hence will trigger people trying to segregate the church, and not knowing the impact this church has to so many communities within America, both directly and indirectly. And that is why he's speaking of the supply chain of food, like how the church is really contributing in ensuring that American families have, subsidies, food, given that they are the largest suppliers of food in the States, especially in different communities where people might not actually be able to afford. They make it more possible for those foods to be affordable and reachable. And the way he explains that widely the church started this program long time, and members of the church are being taught how to be prepared, in times of need, by stocking enough food, ensuring that you have enough water, and ensuring that you can plant your own food when you have a small garden. And by the way, those are principles that members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints are always taught. Now you can imagine you interfere with such a people who are holding the entire food supply in your country. What do you think will happen? What do you think will happen? This might bring serious shortages to an extent that some families might end up starving because of this problem. And I think this is what this gentleman is trying to say here, that economically and socially, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is playing a very big role, very big role in both social and economical security of each and every individual. But this issue of the church not being Christian, it is simply political. It is actually political. It has got nothing to do with somebody's spirituality. It has got nothing to do with somebody's spirituality. This is actually political. And that is why the statement of America is being warned by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is so key, because when a government starts fighting an organization that feeds the people, and this organization has a lot of massive land, massive land, and that land is not actually left fallow, it is being utilized to produce food so that she can be able to sell this food in another level or in another country, so that is what it is. But this picture of just people waking up and saying, this church is like ABCD, at times you may not know what you're doing to your own country. You may not know what you're doing to your own country. Like right now, I'm made to understand that the church controls over 70% of food supply, in the United States of America, because it is the world's, it is the largest, organization in the States that produces food. It is working on food. And this is what people need to think about and reevaluate before stating some of the statements, or giving some of the statements that might have a long-term effect to an entire society, you know. So that is what it is. People think that the church is just something small. This is actually an international kingdom. Now it's growing very fast in different parts of the world. And that's why when a government makes such statements, it is so much, you know, detrimental to many people, because you don't know what that organization is doing to so many people in the world. You know, that is great. And I so say in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, amen.